Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Science of SaaS Startups podcast. Today, I'm talking to Guillem Sague. Guillem is the CEO of CarriedAI, which is an AI operating system for the investment industry. Guillem, welcome.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for inviting me. Great to be here.
No problem. So we always kind of kick things off by asking a few questions just to help the audience get to know you as a person a little bit. So first question, if you're in an alternate universe and you're doing any other profession other than being a software CEO, which would you choose and why?
Okay, that's an interesting question to kick it off. So probably I would have loved to be a professional football player,
Okay.
but I wasn't talented enough. So hopefully in the next universe I will be.
Yeah. So you're from Barcelona originally, is that right? So would you be playing for Barcelona?
Yeah, that would be great.
We all have these dreams, yeah.
Yeah.
So next question, if you are given the opportunity to buy everybody on earth one book, which book would you buy for everyone? Which book do you think that everyone should have the chance to read?
Let me think about this a little bit because there are so many interesting books. But the one that I would recommend everyone to read probably is a book called The Intelligent Investor from Benjamin Graham, who was the teacher of Warren Buffett, was the first one that kind of got the idea of value investing out there and sort of analyzing the stocks, like if those were companies that you were going to own. I think that's super valuable. So I would definitely recommend everyone to read that to get the basics financial knowledge that you need.
Obviously, like a very famous book in your industry. I mean, do you think that's something like the individual can learn from as well in terms of kind of implementing that and making their own investment decisions?
I think in terms of the basic principles, definitely yes. When it goes into more the sort of the more detailed stuff that Benjamin Graham talks about, I'm not sure it's so relevant. Probably it's also not relevant for anybody right now because the way he used to analyze companies, it's not very useful today. But the basic principles, I think they are for sure.
Yeah. Okay, great stuff. So when I talk to entrepreneurs, I think as a kind of a group, they're kind of inherently optimistic about the future. And I think you kind of have to be a little bit as an entrepreneur. But I thought it'd be interesting to ask if there is anything that makes you kind of anxious about the future of the software industry, you know, what kind of concerns you might have.
I think that what makes me anxious as a founder is that by virtue of being it so easy today to build software, thanks to the platforms that have been built, AWS on the cloud computing side, now the large language models that are available to everyone, it gets extremely competitive, extremely fast, right? So you kind of have to be always worried about if I wake up the next morning, I will have the next, YC funded company or Sequoia funded company doing what I do. And that's something that obviously worries me as a founder, right? So that's kind of the most, let's say the biggest anxiety feeling that I have when looking at our industry, that it's become so easy to build companies that the competitiveness, it's become also massive.
So kind of building that moat becomes kind of harder and harder. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. So it has to be a different mode than just having a better tech or just having, or even being faster, because at some point, yes, you can be faster than the others, but kind of the differences in speed are so small that that you need to think differently to build modes. So I don't have a definite answer on how to build modes in general in software. I think some companies have found ways to do that, but we definitely all have to figure out how to do it.
Yeah. Okay, great stuff. So hopefully kind of audience has got to know you a little bit as a person. So if we jump into kind of CarriedAI, or perhaps like before we do that, perhaps you could just share a little bit about your kind of personal career journey and kind of what you did prior to setting up this company.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, I'm originally from Barcelona, big football fan, of course. Apart from that, I sort of had a passion for physics growing up. So I studied physics, and then once I finished, I went to do my PhD to Germany, which is where I currently live in, and sort of like my second, if you want, my second home. When I finished my PhD, I realized that the life at the university wasn't really for me. And by pure chance, there was a venture capital firm in the same town, well, in the same city where I lived. It's not a very big city, but it's not also the largest one. And sort of I ended up doing an internship there because they had good experience with physicists apparently. So I that's how I started my career in VC, and I spent actually 12 years doing VC, which is a very long time, but also because the cycles in the industry are very long, the commitments are very long. You make commitments to your LPs, to your partners. And although I always wanted to become an entrepreneur, because it comes also from in my family, there's been a few, I also had the feeling that I had given commitments to people and I didn't want to break them. But eventually, sort of, I realized that I wanted to become an entrepreneur. So about 4 months ago now, I decided to set up a company, CarriedAI, that hopefully uses artificial intelligence to change how investment decisions are made. Right. So coming from the world of investment decisions being made by humans, and seeing how large language models, became so powerful, I realized that the future might look very differently than today, and I wanted to be part of it.
Yeah. Okay. So if we jump into kind of CarriedAI a little bit, perhaps like give us the origin story. What was the kind of pain you were feeling, on the VC side, kind of making these decisions, and that day when you kind of came up with this idea, this technology which is going to solve those problems. Just talk us through how that all worked.
Yes. So our vision is that, and we summarize it in a sentence that I hope is sort of very, very clear. We think that the next Sequoia will not look like Sequoia, in the sense that the investment firms today are a group of humans, extremely intelligent humans, working together with a very strong network, making investment decisions. And we think that the future will look like a mixture of artificial intelligence agents, what we call AI agents, working together with humans, and becoming as a group much more powerful and much more, if you want, intelligent in making those investment decisions, right? So that's what I realized coming from the investment world, sort of being a human and making investment decisions by discussing with other colleagues. And at the same time, obviously, we believe that the large language models themselves will become probably better than any human in any domain. In the sense that probably we will have a large language model that will be better than the best radiologist, another model that will be probably better than the best mathematician, et cetera, et cetera. And we think that there is no reason to believe that there won't be models that will be better than the best investor, right? So that's kind of the basic idea of our company.
And how much do you think about kind of investment as like that balance between art and science? I'm just kind of interested, obviously we're kind of seeing AI systems creating kind of amazing art these days as well. So it's not necessarily, AI can only do the science bit and humans can do the art. But I'm just like, where does that balance get drawn between kind of art and science in the investment industry, do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question also, because I think that large language models to some extent are more art than science. I mean, if you ask researchers, will tell you that they don't really fully understand how large language models work. They just seem to work, but so there's a bit of art there, at least so far. But I think that, I mean, in the end, investing is probably a probabilistic science,
Mhm.
So it's not a science that is deterministic in the sense that you make the same things and you always get the same results, right? And it's not predictable, but it's probabilistic. But if you think about in a probabilistic way, it's probably closer to a science than an art, and it's becoming closer and closer. Also, the fact that many people are interested in understanding how the distribution of returns works, how this so-called power law that drives returns in VC, meaning that a very small part of your portfolio make up for like most of the returns. That's in the end probabilistic science, and I think that more and more people are understanding that that's a science, although it feels a little bit like an art, particularly when you work so on the day-to-day basis.
Yeah, yeah, you want to feel of yourself as an artist.
Yeah.
So this is a solution for the VC industry. Is it also for kind of other areas of the investment industry, like kind of private equity and kind of other parts?
Yeah, exactly. So I talk about VC because it's where I come from, but our industry is meant to be, our solution, is meant to be for all institutional investors, mostly in private markets and private assets, which is where the large language models kind of give you the largest edge. There is already a lot of technology in the public markets, a lot of quant investment funds and sort of also AI already working on that. We're focused more on the private part, but that's still an enormous side of the economy. I mean, it's extremely large.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously, kind of right at the beginning of this journey, you're becoming that kind of software entrepreneur that you kind of had your eye on being for a really long time. What are the kind of first things on your plate? Like what are the big challenges and kind of issues that you need to solve kind of first to get this off the ground?
So I think the most important thing was finding the right co-founder, right? There is so much risk in choosing the wrong person to work with, because you have very often you have very few data points. I mean, this person through a friend sometimes, but you've interacted with this person for a few weeks, and then you have to make the decision: do you want to found the company or not? And then once you do that,
Yeah.
that's kind of almost forever, right? So you have to make a very important decision in a very short period of time. So I was very lucky that I have found a co-founder who is a good friend of mine. We've worked together for 6 years, so we know each other very well. There is very little, risk on are we going to work together well or not, and was the most important part. And once you have that, of course, then you have to deal with every day some new challenges, right? I guess our biggest challenge at the moment is to be able to implement all the ideas and everything that we have in our heads that we want to build, to be able to implement it and have the resources to do that. Because obviously you need to hire people, you need to pay salaries, et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes the fundraising cycles are longer than what I would like to, because I would really ideally like to have the money today to hire all the people that I want to hire and do all the things that I want to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about some of the kind of lessons for other founders and kind of startup entrepreneurs, you've obviously seen a lot of companies kind of in your kind of prior experience as a kind of a VC, and you've seen kind of entrepreneurs where they've been really successful and perhaps, entrepreneurs where they haven't been so successful. So I'm sure you've kind of seen what good looks like and what bad doesn't look like as well. So I'm kind of interested, just thinking about kind of fundraising generally in software, like you just touched on previously there. There's obviously been massive changes in the last 2 years in kind of the fundraising market in the software industry. We've seen kind of the exuberant peaks, of a couple of years ago, and then obviously a much more conservative approach that VCs have been taking more recently, and a lot of redundancies and cuts which have been made in software companies as a result of that. How do you think kind of founders should be thinking about fundraising now, and how should they be thinking from an investor's perspective?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously the investment industry in general and the VC industry in particular are very prone to boom and bust cycles. A lot of exuberance, and then all of a sudden everyone is depressed and very, very negative about the future. And of course, that's never like a general theme across the board. Sometimes you have pockets of exuberance and pockets of depression, right? So I think now the AI is probably a pocket of exuberance, whereas other areas are a pocket of depression, if you want. I think that obviously how you think about fundraising depends on whether you are in a pocket of exuberance or in a pocket of depression. In terms of AI, I would say probably it's a good time to fundraise because people are very optimistic about the future. Nevertheless, I have seen in the same company several hypes, so booms and busts. So whenever you raise, you have to think about that. Okay, now I managed to raise, but what if I need to raise again, and what do I need to deliver? So I'm always focused on, as a founder, and also my suggestion to other founders is to be super scrappy, very much focused on not overspending, not sort of be careful with how you use the money, because it might come a time where this money is not there anymore for you to raise, right? So whatever you do, if you raise in a hype environment or in a sort of more depressed environment, be always focused on how much money you raise and how you use it. That's my advice, right? So we are at our company very much focused on only spending the money in things that are really important. So actually, we only spend the money for developing the product at the moment, right? Everything else is not important.
Yeah, sure. And you know, what's your kind of perspective for 2024 on things? You know, I kind of track funding in the software industry on a daily basis. Like we do a post on LinkedIn where we kind of outline all the investments that have happened that day, and we're seeing a little bit of a return to some of those kind of later stage growth rounds, you know, which was the big obvious thing that kind of disappeared like over the last kind of 18 months, 2 years. You know, the growth rounds were kind of way down from where they had been, and seed rounds, there were a lot more kind of happening at that seed level. You know, do you think we'll continue to see an increase in some of those growth rounds, or do you see kind of more of the same of last year, broadly speaking?
Yeah, I think in the end, it's kind of the investment industry are all those stages, you know, pre-seed, seed, Series A, Series B, late stage IPO, connected somehow, but with a time delay. And I think that the first one to move seems to be the public market. And then sort of any correction in the public market, up or down, affects then the state that is the closer to the public market, with later stage private companies. And then sort of that stage then affects the other stage that is closer, which might be the Series B, and then sort of the other that is closer, which is a Series A, and so on. And so if the public markets move up, then sooner or later the rest of the stages follow. And if the public markets move down, then also sooner or later the rest of the stages follow with a time delay, right? So what we saw is that obviously 2 years ago, public markets in technology crashed. And then right after, late stage private growth investments also crashed. And sort of that affected all the stages. And now we see the reverse effect happening, right? So we've had a very good year in the public markets in technology. I think the NASDAQ grew like 50% or something. And then sort of we are seeing the comeback of the late stage private.
Okay.
And then probably at some point we'll see the comeback of the Series B and then the Series A and so on. So I think we are now, at least the signals show that we are getting out of the, let's say, the bottom. We still have a lot of runway to go until we go back to the same levels. Probably we'll never go back to the same levels, or at least not in a few years. But I think we are definitely in a recovery right now in the private markets. That's my assessment.
Yeah. Okay, good stuff. And you know, you touched on kind of product being the kind of big focus for you guys at the moment, and kind of the initial kind of investment that you're looking to make. I mean, in trying to find that kind of product market fit, you know, how do you go about kind of gathering feedback, you know, from the market, from kind of initial users, you know, and kind of iterating, you know, on different features within the product to kind of make sure, you know, you've got the right fit for what the market needs?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously that's work in progress at the moment for us, but we have released our MVP, what we call the alpha version, and we have now a handful of people that know us, that we know very well, and that are testing the product and giving us feedback. At the current stage, we focus on small number of people and a lot of contact with them, a lot of feedback from them. Both quantitative as well as qualitative. And then probably the next stage will be more like a larger group of testers or more in the beta phase. And then eventually we'll be ready to launch in the general availability. So what I'm focusing right now is on asking the basic questions to my users. What is the job that you're trying to accomplish with the tool? What are you trying to do? And then ask them to rank the things that they hate the most and the things that they like the most. But actually, I prefer that they tell me the things that they hate the most, because that is sort of the quick wins that I can easily remove from the product or change.
Yeah.
That's a phase that we're actually going through right now.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of kind of customer acquisition, I don't know if you've kind of thought that far ahead in terms of your kind of business plan. What are the kind of strategies? Is this going to be kind of a direct sale, that you'll kind of just be selling directly to kind of the investment community, or you'd be looking to kind of build it through partnerships? How do you see that working?
Our initial hypothesis is that we will open it up in a free model, at least as an initial approach, to get as many users as possible using the tool. And then within the tool, we want to do product marketing. So we want to add the paid features and sort of for the users to be able to see those features, and then experiment and iterate from that. Like understand, are they interested in those features, yes or not? Are they clicking on it? Are they seeing it? And over time, we'll see how this evolves. In the long term, at least in our industry, most of the tools that you can find actually have an enterprise type of sales model. But a few of them started with a product-led growth approach. So for example, I'm thinking of Crunchbase. Crunchbase started with a product-led growth approach. They still have the ability, or they still offer the possibility to buy the product on a self-service basis without having to talk to anyone. But I would say that probably most of the revenues at the moment come from enterprise sales. So that's kind of a bit of an example of that we want to follow. We think that could work well for us too.
Yeah. Okay. And just thinking about building software companies in Europe, obviously for many, many years, kind of the US was the only show in town for kind of software startups, and, it would draw in talent from all over the world as people went to kind of headquarter their companies in the US. But more and more now we see kind of many successful software companies coming from Europe and the Middle East and Asia. I just wondered, from your perspective, what you see are the kind of pros and cons that founders should think about when deciding kind of where to kind of HQ their company.
Yeah, that's obviously here I have a bit of a conflict of interest, because I'm in Europe, a European. I would love to see more European software companies. I think some of them have achieved that, but not many. And I still believe that the best place to build a software company is in the US. I mean, that's probably something that you cannot deny. However, with the infrastructure, with the cloud infrastructure, and with the, let's say, product-led growth approach of some companies, this has opened up opportunities to build very big software companies from Europe without having to move to the US or having to have even presence in the US, right? But that's mostly focused on the product-led growth approach. For enterprise companies, I think it's still true that if you want to build a big software company, at some point you need to have people in the US or go to the US. Since we are focusing on our product-led growth approach at the moment, we still believe that we can do that from Europe. But it's an open question if at some point we'll move to the US.
Yeah, I mean, all startups have to be adaptable, don't they? So I guess as things change,
Yeah.
you change with them. So just to kind of cap things off then, your kind of advice for any other kind of aspiring entrepreneurs out there, or maybe people who've got an idea but kind of haven't started out on that. I guess you're kind of still very early into your journey. You kind of haven't made the mistakes yet. But what would your kind of advice be to someone out there who's kind of interested in starting up a new company?
I think my advice would be that, particularly at the beginning, which is the experience that I have fresh in my mind, that talking to people is helpful, but you have to take feedback always with a grain of salt, because there are so many reasons, particularly from investors, from VCs, why your idea is not good enough, it's not a big market enough, it's not going to work, etc. And you have to kind of also, in the end, follow your instincts and understand that you only need 1 out of 100 VCs to say yes. You only need 1 out of 100 investors to say yes. So then, talk to people, but never be discouraged. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I guess the kind of biggest thing that any startup entrepreneur has to have is kind of resilience, and kind of have that in abundance. But then, like you say, you also need to kind of have your ears open so that, when very smart people are telling you a lesson, you're going to hear that as well. So
yeah, it's striking the right balance. Probably that's the right way to think about this.
Great stuff. Okay, well, I really appreciate you coming on today, Guillem. If people want to get in touch and discuss CarriedAI, what's the best way of reaching you?
They can reach me over LinkedIn. I always answer I try to answer all my messages. And probably that's the fastest way. Otherwise, obviously, they can still go to the website, and we have a contact form there too.
Great stuff. Okay, well, I really appreciate your time and look forward to seeing, how CarriedAI grows in the coming years.
Super. Thanks for the time, Ben. It's been super fun. Stay in touch. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.